So good evening, everybody. My name is Kelly Japorek. I am the Environmental Program Manager with the Lakeland Agricultural Research Association. I'm really happy to have Gabe Brown joining us this evening. He's in the same situation as us, lots of snow, lots of cold, so we can all enjoy winter together. I really hope that you guys enjoy the webinar this evening. I took a little bit of a poll of what we're going to be talking about through some of our producers. So please feel free to put as many questions that you'd like in the Q&A section, and Gabe decided to stay on as long as there are still questions. So feel free to all the way during and all the way at the end to keep on submitting those questions that we're going to go through. So welcome, Gabe.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Do you see just one slide now?
Yeah.
Are we okay? Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be with all the people in the Lakeland region again. I got to tell you, I've missed getting up there the past 3 years, so I'm glad that the border is open up, and I'm looking forward to coming back into Canada this summer here. I've got a few trips planned up there. So what I planned on doing this evening, as Kelly said, she polled some of the producers, and they gave me some ideas on a few things to talk about. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. And please, you can ask questions, and don't limit your questions to just what I'm talking about. Anything you want to ask me is fair game as far as I'm concerned. So I always start out my presentations with the 6 principles of a healthy ecosystem, because everything I do on our ranch and everything I teach as I travel around the world really evolves around these 6 principles. First principle, of course, is that nature always acts in context. I tell people there's a reason bananas don't grow in North Dakota. You know, we have to learn to farm and ranch in our context. Second principle is no mechanical and limited chemical disturbance. Yes, there's some disturbance in nature from burrowing animals and earthworms, etc., but not the copious amounts of disturbance, both mechanical and chemical, that we cause in agriculture today. Third principle is that of armor on the soil surface. You know, you walk into a forest, walk into a prairie area, how much bare soil do you see? Now, usually there's only bare soil where mankind's actions have caused it to occur. Nature wants to cover that soil, and yet so often in agriculture, we leave that soil bare. Fourth principle is that of diversity. Nature thrives on diversity. You know, 200 to 300 years ago, there were literally hundreds of different plant species on every acre. Now, with current farming methods, you know, I know people who only grow one cash crop, and they have that same cash crop on the same field every year. That's not how nature thrives. Fifth principle is living plant root networks as long as possible throughout the year. We need that living root in the soil to feed biology. We need that living plant to cycle as much solar energy as possible. And then the sixth principle, of course, is that of a diverse array of animals and insects. Ecosystems do not function properly without animals and insects. And yet it amazes me how much loss we're seeing in biodiversity. We need to increase biodiversity, not decrease it. And why do we do these 6 principles? The answer, of course, is to drive the 4 ecosystem processes. The energy cycle, collecting that free solar energy. That free solar energy then feeds soil biology, builds soil aggregates, those plants, those biotic glues given off by mycorrhizal fungi and by biology build soil aggregates. That drives the water cycle. The biology itself drives the nutrient cycle, and it all hinges on biodiversity. You know, one of the true joys I have is traveling all over the world and doesn't matter where I go, I can talk to people, and I'm confident that this will work on their farm, on their ranch, because these principles and ecosystem processes are the same everywhere. So we had some questions that came in today, and I put this presentation together based on these questions. One of the things that uh, I like to do when I go out on a farm or ranch is I ask the farmer or rancher all the time, what are they observing? Well, I put this picture in here purposely, and yeah, I realize that some of you may be calving at this time, but what do you observe there? And I got to tell you, I did this for a number of years also, so I'm guilty of it too. Well, what you're observing is that we're calving out of context. You know, when do the deer have their fawns? Now, was telling Kelly beforehand that for 25 years, I used to calve in February and March in North Dakota. You know, that was out of context with the environment. I was violating the first principle of a healthy ecosystem. So when my son came back from college, we switched our calving date, and it's much easier calving now in context with nature. We start calving the middle of May and finish up by the end of June. And I tell people I should have to pay somebody to enjoy calving that much, because it's absolutely no work when you're calving in synchrony with nature. The other thing that I learned over time is don't provide the animals with a bed and breakfast. You know, we should work as much as possible in synchrony with nature, so that we don't have to put up as much processed feed. We don't have as much fossil fuel usage, don't burn as much fuel, don't have as much depreciation, wear and tear on equipment, not as much labor. You know, I always tell people, if you think those animals want to stand in a corral all winter, go open the gate and see if they're going to stay in that corral. So what we found is that we have to allow animals to select and balance their diet. Now, this hinges, of course, on us providing a very diverse ecosystem. And it's much less diverse today than it was several hundred years ago, as I said. But if we allow them the diversity, they will balance their own diet. What I'm trying to show you in this picture is these calves are learning how to balance their diet. That red calf there is chewing on some hairy vetch, very high in protein, and he's balancing his own ration. We're going to talk a bit about epigenetics and the ability of animals to, as Fred Provenza liked to say, genetically program themselves to live in their environment. And in order to do that, you have to allow your animals to do what they do best. This is just a photo of my herd of cows out grazing on a cover crop during the winter. And they're perfectly content and happy out there. Those mama cows are teaching their offspring how to balance their own diet, how to forage through that snow, and their offspring then in turn will be even better suited to do that. You know, there's data out there that shows these epigenetic effects can last will affect them for a minimum of 7 generations, and probably much longer than that. So you're more or less fetal programming these animals to do a better job and to survive in your environment. We're often told as ranchers, well, we have to produce the type of cattle that the feedlot wants, right? Well, the feedlot's not out there, you know, on your farm, on your ranch. You need to produce type of animals that survive in your environment. Don't worry about what the feedlot wants. what works best in your environment. So on our ranch, we will graze our animals as long as possible. Now, last year, we only had to feed hay 18 days. This year, we've had over 100 inches of snow already. And so we've already fed the animals about 80 days this year, which is, considerably longer than we normally do, but that's the way it is some years. But what we're really trying to do is change the epigenetics of our animals. And I know a lot of people look at this heifer calf there and go, boy, that's a squatty, dumpy little heifer calf. I look at her and I say, that's going to be an animal that'll flesh on next to nothing, will stay in condition, will breed back every year and raise a calf and make me a profit. And that's what I care about, is what's going to make us a profit. Here's a photo I just took this winter. These are our bred heifers out there grazing, and they're doing fine. They get through that snow and they can balance their own diet. We don't supplement them up until the point that the snow gets too deep. We found that we can graze through 30 inches of snow without much problem. Obviously now I'm saying snow, not ice, but they will just adapt and learn to do so. And they do just fine. Now, a lot of people ask, well, what do you do about water? Well, who's out watering the deer and the bison and the elk and everything else? Our cattle do just fine on snow, and they have calves hanging on them in the winter. We don't worry about providing them water. Now, full disclosure, we do allow our animals the ability to walk back to a farmstead, but they do that more so only when there's a storm coming. Then you'll see those old cows, they know it's coming. They'll start walking back to the farmstead to get out of the wind and to get some protection. But if it's nice weather out, they'll go weeks without coming back for protection or water. What this really does, though, is this allows us to produce the epigenetics of animals that'll work in our environment. We grow the majority of our forage in a 6 to 8 week window, in June and early July. And then it's pretty rank forage from then on. But our animals have to not only survive on that, they need to thrive on that, and they need to rebreed on that without supplementation. And so what I'm trying to show by this picture here is this photo was taken in August. We had already grown all our forage for the year. Our rain here will typically shut off early July, and we won't get any real moisture until snows in January, February. We'll get maybe a very little amount of precip in the fall, but usually not much. And so that spring growth has to last the entire year. So the point I'm trying to get across to you is, what do I care if the packer and the feedlot want something else? Somebody's still going to buy our calves, and quite frankly, we'll top the market about every year. Why? Because we have the type of calves that'll flesh on very low quality forage, and it's because of the epigenetics in those animals. So this is one of our home raised herd bulls. We raise all of our own bulls, our own rams in our sheep flock, our own boars in our hog herd, and we need the type of animal that can, as I said, survive and thrive on our land, on our system. As you can see there, this is photos taken on our ranch. And as you can tell, I tell people my nearest windbreak is Canada. You people up there in that region, I've been up there. I know you have bush. We don't have any bush here. When the wind blows, it's going to blow a long ways. So they got to be able to survive in the open areas. A little bit about our production cycle. As I said, we calve in sync with nature. We calve both the cow herd and the heifers at the same time, starting in mid-May and we're finished calving by late June. We leave the calves on the cows for most of the winter. We still haven't weaned yet this year. We'll probably be weaning sometime here in late March or early April. And that'll give them about 45 days in order to flesh back up those cows before they calve again, and they'll flesh up just fine. We expose all of our heifers to bulls for only 30 days. And the reason we do that is we want only the most fertile to get bred. We ultrasound them 45 days later after we pull those bulls. We do not fertility pregnancy test the cows. The reason being, what am I going to do if we have an open cow or two? Am I going to wean those calves early? I'm not weaning the rest of my calves till April. No, we might as well leave them on those cows during the winter. Well, then all we do is the last week of calving, the end of June, we just go set up some corral panels in whatever paddock those cows are in. Any cow that is dry means she either lost her calf at calving or she was open. Well, when's the hot hamburger market? Summer, right? For grilling. So those cows go straight to the butcher and we butcher them and sell the beef. That saves us all the time and effort and all the work of pregnancy testing the cows. Now, I should back up a little. The heifers that are ultrasounded open, those go into grass finishing. Anything that's bred goes right out with the cow herd. As I said earlier, all bulls are selected from our own herd. We really believe that we should not be propping up the bottom end. Producers tend to spend money that only serves the purpose of keeping those poorer animals in the herd. Why? Sell the bottom end and the expenses stop. So now I'm going to say something here, but you have to take this in your own context. Okay. Back approximately 13 years ago, we quit using all vaccines. We quit using all wormers. We don't use any insecticides, no supplements of any kind. Now, I'm not going to say that you should do that. That's up for you to decide. But I just didn't want to spend money anymore. And if our cattle can't thrive without that, they don't belong in my herd. And what we found since then is we have a herd of cattle that are very easy fleshing. They're very moderate in size, and they can thrive in our environment. And I really encourage people to take a look at this because you will end up with a much more profitable cow herd as a result of it. Switch gears a little bit. I'm going to show you some photos. I moved this group of grass finishers into this paddock, and we had a few Russian olive trees in there, and they immediately went to this Russian olive tree and started eating all the leaves off it. And in a matter of minutes, this is what it looked like. And so you get thinking about that. Why did they do that? You know, why were they eating those leaves? Well, I'm going to talk more about that coming up. Here's a picture of a giant ragweed plant. I don't know if you have giant ragweed up there, but it is very prolific, thrives in compacted soils and where there's a lot of nitrogen. Now, these next photos were not taken at my place. This is from a client of ours in Minnesota. He had an infestation of giant ragweed. And so he decided to turn that into cash and graze them with his cow herd. Look at how those cows are consuming that giant ragweed. And why that giant ragweed is there, it's cycling through that excess nitrogen that's in the soil. There's too much nitrogen in the soil. Giant ragweed loves that, so it proliferates there. And that's nature's way of healing excess nitrogen. Well, he's turning that into cash with the cow herd. Here's just a photo that really shows the biomass production he was getting. You can see where he mowed through it there to the right in order to put up the poly wire. but look at what's happening there. Uh, he's healing that land while taking that symptom and converting it into a money. He's solving a problem rather than treating a symptom. Many of you have heard of Dr. Fred Provenza. I hope you've read the book Nourishment, What Animals Can Teach Us About Nutritional Wisdom. It's an absolutely fantastic read. And see, what those animals I just showed you were doing is they were seeking out, those grass finishers of mine were seeking out certain compounds in that buffalo berry plant. Okay. Those cows on my client's place, they were seeking out certain compounds in that giant ragweed. What Dr. Provenza has spent his career studying is how animals have the ability to balance their own rations and to seek out, if that's if the diversity is available, they can balance their own rations, seek out the plants that are needed that cycle different nutrients. And I'm going to talk more about this coming up. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the rhizophagy cycle, but this is amazing. What this diagram is depicting is the root of a plant. And if you follow the arrows here, what's really happening, you've been told that plants exude root exudates to attract biology, which is certainly true, and that biology feeds on those root exudates. But what Dr. James White discovered was that some of those microorganisms, those bacteria, are actually entering in to the root tip of the plant. And then when that bacteria is inside the plant, a reactive oxidative process occurs and it actually strips the nutrients out of the biology. Once it does that, then it moves that biology up and exudes it out the root hairs of the plant. So this next photo here shows that cloudy area, that's the root hair. That tip coming out is the root hair on a plant root, and that cloudy area around it is the biology that's being exuded back out. It was inside the plant, now it's being exuded back out to go collect more nutrients and bring it to the plant. Now I'm going to go back here a little bit. If that isn't amazing enough, what else Dr. White discovered is that during the reproductive phase of a plant can move that genetic material of the biology up through the plant and put it on the seed of the plant. So the seeds that are being formed in this plant. So think of what's happening. Then when that seed is dropped or carried away by an animal, the biology is already there to start the process over again. Now think about what I'm saying here. What do we do in mankind's hubris? We had seed treatments, right? Many farmers put seed treatment on their seed. They're destroying and killing the very biology that nature is putting there to help that plant cycle nutrients. This to me just shows the hubris of mankind. We think we're doing a good thing. We think we know them better. No, we don't. That's ridiculous. And that's why, we really need to be keeping our own seed. And I'm going to talk more about that coming up. You see, what the hubris of mankind has done, it's caused a decrease in the nutrient density of our food. And our foods have decreased anywhere from 15 to 65% in nutrient density over the past 50 years. Here's some work by Dr. David Thompson. Dr. Thomas shows that 27 different kinds of vegetables, copper decline 76%, calcium 46%, and so on. what's happening is, as we degrade our soils and degrade our ecosystems, and we use what we think is more quote unquote improved varieties, we're really producing food that's lower in nutrient density. Let's look at mineral depletion in meat. This is 10 kinds of meat. Look at that. Copper, 24% decline. Calcium, 41. Iron, 54%. People buy beef thinking it's high in iron, yet it's declined 54%. So on. An individual today would have to consume twice as much meat, 3 times as much fruit, 4 times as many vegetables to get the same amount of minerals and trace elements as compared to those foods in 1940. We wonder why we have such a health crisis occurring across the world. Well, this is one of the reasons. Now, don't get me wrong. I am now in no way putting all the blame on farming alone. Sedentary lifestyle and poor eating habits has to do with a lot of it. But us as farmers and ranchers, we have to accept part of the blame. Masanabu said it best when he said, food and medicine are not two different things. They are the front and back of one body. Chemically grown vegetables may be eaten for food, but they cannot be used for medicine. And, I think, unfortunately, this COVID pandemic that we just went through proved that out. Many of those who unfortunately succumbed to COVID, it was because they had a compromised immune system. And our immune system is directly dependent on the foods we eat. So one of the things that Understanding Ag is working on is determining nutrient density of foods grown in healthy soils. This is Dr. Stefan Van Vliet. He is a scientist at Utah State University. The machine on the right, that's a mass spectrometer. And here's what Dr. Van Vliet and his team are determining. They're finding that grazing livestock on plant species diverse pastures concentrates a wider variety of phytochemicals in their meat and milk compared to animals grazing non-diverse pastures. While phytochemicals are further reduced and often remained absent in meat and milk from animals fed grain-based concentrates in feedlots. And I fully understand that some of you may not want to hear this, but this is what's occurring. And Dr. Van Vliet, Provenza, and Kronberg have several years' data, and we're helping them on this project. As a matter of fact, this past year, our ranch here in North Dakota was one of them that they tested. They can identify over 2,500 different phytochemical compounds. And what they're finding is the healthier the soils, the healthier the grains, vegetables, fruits, and proteins that contain a much higher diversity of these phytonutrients. So they're comparing the same variety of grain, the same vegetable, the same fruit, same pastured protein grown in and on healthy soils as compared to that grown on more degraded soils. So here's what they're finding. They're finding that if animals are fed a high concentrate limiting ration, and by limiting ration, I mean limited in the diversity, and if those grains and the foragers were grown on more degraded soils, there's a much lower array and amount of all of these phytochemicals, the terpenoids, phenols, carotenoids, and tocopherols. And it's those phytochemicals that really drive the health of our gut microbiome, drives the health of the animal's gut microbiome also. So this is a project that we're really excited about. We've been involved with for a number of years. It's expanding rapidly. We think in the near future, we'll be moving to human trials where we'll actually feed humans for a period of time on a diet that was grown in and on healthy soils. And then we'll have a break and then feed that same test group a diet comprised of products that were grown on more degraded soils. And we're pretty confident what it's going to show. See, our goal is to allow farmers and ranchers to be paid for providing food that can be used as preventative medicine. I really believe as a society, we need to get back to that. We need to think of our food as preventative medicine. Rather than buying prescriptions, people should be buying nutrient-dense food. So, want to talk about regenerative agriculture, and regenerative is kind of a buzzword. I've been going down this path a long time, and really it amazes me the last 3 years in particular how the word regenerative has really caught on. So this is a definition we came up with at Understanding Ag. We think regenerative agriculture is farming and ranching in synchrony with nature to repair, rebuild, revitalize, and restore ecosystem function, starting with the life in the soil and moving to all life above the soil. We're able to regenerate our soils much faster than we used to think possible. In the photo there, on the left-hand side of the screen is some of my soil. On the right-hand side is some of my neighbors, and my neighbor is 10 years of no-till, but he lacks the diversity, the cover crops, and the livestock integration. Considerable difference there. We've now been able, on some parts, we have well-aggregated soils down to 48 inches deep. The more pore spaces you have, the more biology, the more water that can infiltrate, the more oxygen to the roots, the more nutrients that'll cycle, and that all leads to resiliency. And it's because of this that my partners and I in Understanding Ag, we saw that the word regenerative was kind of being greenwashed. There was a lot of companies that are out claiming to and saying they're purchasing food that's regenerative, they're selling regenerative product, but in our minds, it wasn't really, we didn't think it was regenerative. So we formed a company called Regenerified, and Regenerified's whole mission is to increase farm and ranch profitability and get farmers and ranchers paid for the good they're doing on their own farm and for the environment, with all the ancillary benefits that are provided to society, such as clean air, clean water, and nutrient-dense food. It's all based on the 6-3-4, the 6 principles of soil health, the 3 rules of adaptive stewardship to drive the 4 ecosystem processes. And there is a difference. The egg on the right was produced on our ranch on healthy soils. The egg on the left was one that was produced on soils not so healthy. Now, it's pretty easy to see which one is going to have the most nutrients in it. This is a grass-finished beef animal from our operation. There's what it looked like a few days later when it was processed. And one of the things we're doing then with Dr. Van Vliet is testing the nutrients in the phytochemical compounds. Now, here's some work Dr. David Montgomery did on our beef, and it's in his new book, What Your Food Ate. What he found was that our grass-fed beef tested higher in omega-3s than 48 of 56 commonly sold fish fillets, including wild salmon. So we're actually higher in omega-3s and CLAs than is wild salmon. And because of this, we are verified through Regenerified, and we can get a substantial premium for our product. Now, Regenerified has been going out and verifying farms and ranches. Carmen Ranch, who sells a lot of beef products, grass-finished products in supermarkets on the West Coast, they are verified, Regenerified, and are receiving a premium for their product. This is some of our honey that we have verified as Regenerified. We can get a premium for that. here's an interesting one. This is Vital Farms. We've worked with Vital Farms. They are verified regenerified. They are actually getting, believe it or not, $2 a dozen higher than organic prices for their eggs. They call them restorative eggs, $2 a dozen higher than organic. Okay. What you see here on the left is a Bread Lab Grains perennial wheat. The thinner plant seed head there in the middle, that is Kernza. Bread Lab Grains is verifying all of their production of their perennial wheat, and it is going into King Arthur flour. King Arthur flour, we just signed a contract with them for $20 a bushel for wheat. I think some of you would be happy to take that premium. Significant premium over organic prices. Just this last week, I got to go down to Maker's Mark Distillery in Kentucky. Maker's Mark is sourcing regenerative corn, barley, and rye for their bourbon. And this is the first regenerative labeled bourbon. They actually made that special label up for this batch when we were there. We're excited that there's going to be a lot of products on the shelf that are verified as regenerative. And the point I'm trying to get across to you is, as a producer, I think it is in your own best interest to start adopting these principles, rules to drive the processes, start moving your operation down this path. Because if you do your homework, there will be premiums available. Now, do we have the supply chains all on board right now to buy all the production? No, of course not. But it's moving in that direction. We're getting calls daily from large companies that are looking to source regeneratively grown products, whether it be grains or proteins. And so we think this is exciting. The other thing, though, about it that I really think we need to think about as producers, producers are very good at growing things or raising things, but oftentimes we're not so good at marketing. I challenge each one of you out there to become a better marketer. What this photo is here, this is an open pollinated corn that I've developed on my farm. It works very well on my farm. I'm not saying it will on yours, but I've taken the time to save the seed. Think of the rhizophagy cycle. I'm making sure that that seed survives on my soils in my ecosystem. And now I've developed my own variety of corn. This is a winter barley variety that I've developed. It overwinters here in North Dakota. I was told, oh, it can't be done. Well, that made no sense to me. We've all harvested barley or durum or oats, whatever, and seen it germinate, and some of it survives over the winter. Here's my same barley crop. This is winter barley. I've now successfully gotten it to overwinter 5 years in a row. Now, every year it gets a little better. It didn't start out that way. I've been working on this for about 8 years, but now I've got a variety that'll overwinter. People tell me things can't be done, and I ask why not. Oftentimes they don't want to try. But the other reason to go down the regenerative path is that it will significantly lower your cost of production. That barley crop you're seeing there, I have not added a single pound of any type of fertility to that field in we're over 15 years now. Okay. Why? Because my nutrient cycle is healthy. I've got healthy biology, protozoa and nematodes consuming the bacteria. I don't have insect pest pressure because the plants are healthy. There's just no need for that. So my cost of production is lower. I can make a profit when most people can't. The fact of the matter is, your farm, your ranch is a direct reflection of you. As I travel around the world, I hear over and over again, but Gabe, you don't understand. My soils aren't like that. Don't give me that. All soils is sand, silt, and clay and biology, just various fractions thereof. You can take that sand, silt, and clay and build aggregates and store more carbon and change that if you want to. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but it can be done. It's being done all over the world. So I just encourage you to take it upon yourself to become educated as to how soil functions and then apply the principles and rules to drive the processes. So this is my, this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I encourage you to go on our Understanding Ag website. We put on a lot of webinars, and we record those webinars just like Kelly is doing here. Listen to them, keep learning. And if you have the opportunity to attend a Soil Health Academy, do that also. So with that, Kelly, I'll certainly be happy to stop sharing my screen and we can take some questions.
Perfect. I see that there's a few already populating the Q&A. So
Okay.
the first one is, after grazing the giant ragweed, did it come back again the following year, or did it go away for the most part?
Yeah, and Cliff told me that it took a few years to totally disappear, but it did. The key there was he did the right thing in that he let the ragweed grow up pretty tall to cycle that nitrogen. And it did go away after a few years.
Okay. The next one is, they agree that food is medicine. They're excited about the idea of improving health quality with the meat, milk, vegetables. How many years of rotational grazing or building the soil would it take before we see an improvement in the nutritional quality of the food product?
Yeah, probably 2. You know, I don't know exactly. That of course depends on how intentional, but you will start to notice an improvement because as you build soil health, the diversity of the biology in the soil will transfer through to the plants, will transfer through to the animals. So it'll happen rather quickly. Now it'll continue to improve, you know, as you advance your ecosystem.
Perfect. So what are the standards one must meet to be considered regenerified?
So you can go on the Regenerified website. And the beautiful thing about the protocol that Doug Peterson put together is everyone is accepted to start. Now you're not verified to start, but then there's going to be a series of tests and an auditor comes out, takes some soil tests, and you have to have a plan to move down the path. And you're adopting, it's based on the 6 principles of soil health that I shared, the 3 rules of adaptive stewardship, and the 4 ecosystem processes. So how much armor do you have on your soil? How much diversity do you have? Do you have a living root? You know, are you infiltrating water? And the protocol, then you get a baseline established. The next year you do the testing again, and if you've advanced, you can be into year 2. Now, if you have been going down this path for a while, you can automatically, there's 5 tiers. You may enter in tier 3, 4, or even 5. Now, the caveat to this, and the beautiful thing is, you're only compared to yourself. So they don't compare your farm to somebody else's. No, are you improving? And are you moving, advancing forward? That's the key.
The next question is, how do you get around the legal side of growing your own seed?
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the States, see, as long as you do not start, you know, I can't go take a protected variety and grow it and keep it. No, I have to start with a non-protected variety. Fortunately, everything I'm growing on my farm, I've been growing for 20 plus years because I've been keeping seed for some of my seeds over 30 years old. So it was a non-protected variety and I can keep that as long as I want. And I can sell it. I can do anything with it. Now, if I sell it, I have to have it tested, of course, for germ and purity, etc. Yep, you'll have to, I'm not telling anybody to dodge what's legal in Canada or not. That you have to find out.
Good answer.
Mhm.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge in creating change on a farm when the farms are profitable by doing the things the way they've always done?
Yeah, farms are profitable, but how profitable? And I would question how profitable if you pull any government subsidies away, how profitable are they? And some are profitable, okay? But then I ask the question, and if that's the case, why would you change? But what are you doing to the resource? I've been on thousands of farms all over the world. I've never, ever stood on a single one, including my own, that's not degraded. By and large, most of the farms we were on, a minimum of 50% of the carbon that was once in those soils is now in the atmosphere. So you can say your farm is profitable, but at what cost? You know, and can it continue? Can your children and grandchildren continue to operate that way? Chances are probably not.
So how do strictly grain farmers make the biggest advancements on soil health without cattle or livestock?
Yeah, and right now at Understanding Ag, we're actively consulting on over 33 million acres in North America. About a third of those acres, there's no livestock integration. Okay. A lot of crop farmers don't want to have livestock, and that's fine. That's their choice. I tell people this: the biggest difference will come about from diversity in the crop rotation. You have to collect as much solar energy as possible because it's carbon that's lacking. You know, nitrogen is not lacking. Above every surface acre of Earth, there's approximately 32,000 tons of atmospheric nitrogen. I still don't understand why farmers buy nitrogen. It's free. You just have to have enough diversity in your crop rotation to cycle it. Okay. What's lacking is carbon. We have to capture as much carbon as we can through photosynthesis. So you need that diversity in the crop rotation. You got to build soil aggregates. You have to implement the other 5 principles. Are we able to significantly advance soil health on farms without livestock? Yes, absolutely. Are we able to make them more profitable? Yes, absolutely. But make no mistake about it, their soils will never be as healthy as they could be if they integrated livestock. So that's up to the owner, though. I'm not going to force them to have livestock if they don't want livestock.
Okay. You said you propagated your winter barley from a spring bred crop. Did you do this in a monocrop situation or did you grow it in a perennial setting?
Yeah, no, I actually propagated the winter barley from a southern winter variety, which they said could not be wintered anywhere north of Nebraska, but that's what I started with. So it was a winter variety, just not adapted to our cold and the length of our winter. And then all I did was seed it in the fall, and the first year, maybe 10% of it survived. I harvested that seed, replanted it the next year, then 20%, and it built up rather quickly. It adapted pretty quickly.
In your book, you talk about seeding warm season species into perennial forages post grazing or haying to increase plant diversity and soil armor. Any tips to increase success with this practice? They use a disc drill if that matters.
Yeah. Okay. I first want to say that's going to be a pretty iffy proposition in Canada because it's an iffy proposition down here. We're in a predominantly cool season environment. And what you need to do is in your native perennial rangelands, what percentage is warm season? Where you are at up there, it's pretty small. I doubt if it's much over 10 or 15%. You just don't have the heat units for those warm season species, to really get them to proliferate. Down here, my most limiting factor is moisture because, as I said earlier, our moisture tends to shut off the 1st of July. And I can get the cool seasons off and then seed a warm season in there, but it takes moisture for that to grow. And yes, we do use a single disc opener drill. A John Deere 1590 is what I have, which I can seed into anything but cement and asphalt with that drill, and I'll get you a crop. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is, being certified as regenerative will give the producer a premium for his products, but does it not create a higher price product, which only higher income families can afford?
Okay. So I love that question. Thank you. As I said, we're not guaranteeing everybody a higher price. And our goal is to move everybody forward in their ecosystem. You will be higher in profitability because you'll be able to decrease your input costs. That we're confident of. At this point in time, there's significant premium. As more and more people enter, the premium paid will become less. So here's my answer to those who say, oh, people can't afford it. Okay, you tell me what people are paying for prescriptions, the average family. Okay. I question, go look at the cost of a box of cereal that's laden with sugar and additives, and then feed that same person some nutrient dense eggs. Okay. You're gonna feed people eggs as cheap as you're feeding them that expensive sugar laden cereal. If we truly want to think of food as preventative medicine, we have to offset the cost of the food with the savings we'd have in healthcare. And, I can't speak for Canada, but the United States spends more on healthcare than any other country in the world. Yet we're the wealthiest country in the world. Okay, there's something wrong there. The farmer should be receiving more of that. And then healthcare costs should go down as we have food that's higher in nutrient density. I will argue that one all day long.
Okay. With the moving forward comment, is weather or other factors out of the control of the farmer set you back? How is this addressed?
Yeah.
Do you want to address that? And then there's more parts of the question.
Okay, I'll address that. And I don't know specifically if they're talking about in the verification process. The verification standards have wrote in there for circumstances beyond your control. And let me give this as an example, though. The last 3 years here, South Central North Dakota, were the driest 3 years ever on record. Okay, they started keeping records in the 1880s. Okay. The last 3 years on my ranch, we've had 6.2, 5.6, and 6.6 inches of precipitation. I combined a crop every year. I'm not saying it was a bumper crop, but we combined a crop every year. All my neighbors around me, they combined one out of those 3 years. Okay. So building resiliency in your soil by building soil aggregates, building that to depth, storing carbon, that allows you to produce more and be much more resilient. So that's how I would address that question.
Okay, then the next part of the question is, how is carbon cycle addressed? Because, or for example, organic matter, they know that there's many forms of carbon in the soil, but just using organic matter as an example, it should go up and down, should it not, in healthy soil ecosystem?
Yep, absolutely it should. And make no mistake about it, I just told you about our last 3 dry years. Do you think I advanced in those years? No, there wasn't enough water hardly for biology. So that's where the contingency lies in. Now that's absolutely correct. Organic carbon is a cycle. And this is why I go crazy over people trying to have these carbon schemes, because it's a cycle. It should be cycling. It should vary. And as farmers, we should take advantage of that cycle. We should allow biology to consume some of the carbon that we're cycling in order to drive our nutrients cycle and to lower our nutrient inputs. However, when you view the protocol and the standards, that's taken into account. It looks at many different things. You're not gonna see where you're being docked if you're not increasing carbon. No, it's how healthy the ecosystem is.
Perfect. If you were to turn back the hands of time, what is the one practice that you are doing now that you wish you would have done then?
Oh, hands down. Because I'm more of a livestock person, I would not have calved in the winter all those years. That's part of the reason I have no hair, you know? And moving to calving in synchrony with nature, that hands down was probably one. I would say a close number two, though, is armor on the soil. Keeping that soil covered. I'm embarrassed when anyone sees bare soil on my ranch. Now, last 3 years on the cropland, it's been tough to keep enough armor on the soil, but you have to keep that soil covered in order to proliferate the biology underneath, in order to build the aggregates that which drives the nutrient and water cycles. Those two things are two things that jump out to me.
When you look to make investments into your soil, is there data on work that you have done to show the turnaround?
Yeah, we have some really good data at Understanding Ag. We're fortunate in that we have a number of projects going on in different watersheds, some projects in Canada where we're showing, well, I'll give you this one. We just finished a 3-year project in the Central Plains here, and there was one really dry year in that project also. We saw a 39% increase in organic carbon levels, you know, 0.3% increase in carbon in the soils, in a 3-year period. And those things equate directly to dollar savings for the producer. And I have many more statistics. We are at Understanding Ag, we're really focused now because we're on so many acres in so many states and countries. We're collecting and collaborating that data, putting it together, and so we can prove this out.
Perfect. The next person says, I love your book. Thank you for all the information you've shared over the years. As an organic producer who cannot use any chemical whatsoever, they find it difficult to control weeds without tillage, and even cover crop cocktails can become weeds in the future, such as Italian ryegrass. The particular problems right now include Canada thistle, stinkweed, pigweed, sow thistle. Do you have any good resources that you can direct them to? They have a mixed farm with 1,000 crop acres and 400 pasture acres and 100 cows.
Yep. Yes, and we work with many organic producers, and even my own farm is, it'd be easy for me to be certified organic if I wanted to. You have to look at why are thistles there? Okay, why are thistles showing up? All of these things are a symptom of a bigger problem. So Canada thistle is there because of the compaction caused from the tillage. Some of the other thistles are there because we're getting either a compaction layer or a lack of soil aggregates. Because if you pull up a thistle plant, you'll find it's really well aggregated soil underneath. Now, what I would recommend, there's several books out there, Weeds and What They Tell Us, and Weeds, Guardians of the Soil. Those are a couple pretty good books out there that I would suggest you take a look at.
If people are interested and they would like to see the data that you have, is there somewhere to access it?
Yeah, and realize not at this point in time. We want to collect some more data. If you have some specific questions and want some specific examples, reach out to me, just gabe@understandingag.com, and I would be happy to. We're not going to share our entire database. That's worth a lot of money. And we don't provide any names, of course, because of client privilege. But I'd be happy to share if there's some specific questions.
Who are some of the most influential people that influenced you the most along your journey?
Oh, man. That's a great question. Well, obviously Jay Fear here in Burley County, a good friend of mine, influenced me. Dr. Dwayne Beck, Dr. Chris Nichols, who many of you know, she's been to Canada a number of times. Dr. Jill Clapperton, David Brandt, Ray Archuleta, All those people influenced me. But there was other, Masanobu Fukuoka with his book, One Straw Revolution, Thomas Jefferson. Back when I was going through those years of hail and drought, I read his diaries of what he was doing on his plantation in Virginia. Yeah, there's a lot of them, too many to, now Dr. David Johnson, Dr. James White with rhizophagy. One of the things about me, I tell people, I grew up in town, so I didn't know a whole lot. So I had to learn everything. I'm an avid learner. And the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. And that's what makes this exciting, is that we're learning all the time, which I'm going to put a plug in right now, Kelly, for your next webinar. So the next webinar next week, you got one of my 3 partners in Understanding Ag, Shane New. And Shane's a farmer from Northeast Kansas, and he's self-taught. And I hope you guys, people, really quiz Shane, because I would put Shane's knowledge of microbiology up against about anybody out there. He knows the nutrient cycle inside and out, and he's just a common stick. He's just a common farmer rancher, but boy, does he know his stuff. So if you got questions on nutrient cycle and fertility, have them ready for next week.
Yeah, Tuesday night. It's going to be a good time.
Yep.
Actually, Avery in the chat quoted Jay Fuhr. It says, if you have more carbon entering your soil than leaving, it is likely that your kids will stay on the farm. If you have more carbon leaving, it's likely that the kids will go with it.
Yep. And I'll add something to that, Kelly. So my son Paul, when he was growing up in high school, there was about approximately 50 ag kids in his class. They hung out and together and that. Today, he's the only one of those 50 that's farming or ranching. And how sad is that? Now, if the children want to leave and don't want to farm or ranch, that's one thing. But you can't tell me that, Paul was the only one that wanted to come back. I blame that on the parents for not making it conducive. If this is such a good lifestyle and is profitable, why aren't there more that come back? So I really, the question was asked earlier about, if it's profitable now, why can't I continue doing what I'm doing? Well, is it really profitable? And are you leaving it better for the next generation? If you are, fine. But if you're driving the next generation off the land, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself some hard questions.
Okay. The next comment is, thanks so much for having thick skin and for living your truth regardless of negative feedback. What would be your top few ways of eliminating glyphosate? They've reduced more than half, but for example, how do you get such a clean winter barley field without the reset, or especially the spring seeded crops?
Yep. And realize, there's a lot of talk out there about roller crimpers and all that. I bought one way back in 2008 or so, and I tried it for 5 years. I didn't have a long enough growing season, and you surely don't up there have a long enough growing season. What I found over time, what I really had to do, I have to set up the next year's crop the previous year. So I have to, if I want to grow a crop like a clean barley crop, I need to grow a cover crop the year before, and I'll just graze it with livestock to generate dollars. And then I have to have, I don't know if you can see that, I have to have a large amount of litter left the following spring. I no-till into that with my single disc opener. And if I'm growing some of these cover crops that are higher in carbon, it'll inhibit the weeds, and I can get that spring annual cash crop up and growing. And once you get a healthy crop up and growing, it stays pretty clean. I mean, once in a while you'll get a flush of green foxtail or something, but I just combine that with it and clean it out, make it chicken feed, turn it into dollars. It's really not that, it's an opportunity.
Good way to put it. What's the best investment you have purchased as far as tools to help you on your journey?
Yeah, hands down, it's the single disc no-till drill for the cropping system. Yeah, single disc no-till drill for cropping, and for the livestock, a roll of poly wire and some portable posts. Moving livestock every day. You know, when I came to this ranch, my father-in-law was running 65 cow-calf pairs, 20 yearlings. Today, Paul on the same ranch is running 250 cow-calf pairs, 100 plus sheep, 400 or 500 hogs, couple thousand chickens. It's amazing how much the productivity has increased just from moving those animals and allowing the rest and recovery time that's needed.
Shorty definitely agrees, says turn obstacles into opportunities.
Yeah.
So we had one person ask, could you recommend a blend of a cover crop that would grow well in central Alberta and maybe make it where it's somebody who's never done it before?
Yeah. And I don't like to do that. And the reason why is I don't know your resource concerns. What is it you're trying to do? Are you trying to add armor? Are you trying to build soil aggregates, trying to cycle nutrients? What was your previous cash crop? What's your next cash crop? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered there. So I hate to give generic um, recommendations. However, if that person wanted to email me, gabe@understandingag.com, I would be happy to have an email volley with them and learn some more where I could steer them in the right direction.
We also had an excellent forage species and cover crop webinar yesterday, and it's
great.
on the Lara YouTube channel. So if you want to know more about which cover crop species, that's definitely something that you're probably going to want to check out.
There you go. And they know more about your area than I would.
Yeah. So you guys are into so many different enterprises. How do you find any time for family or downtime?
Yeah. People are often amazed by that. And I tell them, so our ranch is about 6,000 acres. I mentioned the livestock species, plus there's the cash crops, and everything's direct marketed. So that ranch is ran by our son, who's 35 years old. His fiance works for him full time, and they have one part-time hired man. Now, my wife cleans the eggs every day for him and helps him with some book work, but that's it. And my son will tell you, him and his fiance fully spend 50% of their time marketing. Okay. So you ask, well, who gets all the work done? Well, okay, what work? We're not applying fertilizer. We're not spraying chemical. There's no fungicide, no pesticides. The livestock, just the bred heifers get ultrasounded once a year. So there's no vaccines to give, porons to give. We're not doing so many of those other things. And you might say, yeah, but it takes so much time to move the animals. Oh boy, it really takes a lot of time. The cattle are in two groups, and the only reason they're in two groups is because, for those of you who have been to my ranch, we're more or less ranching in the city now, and there's housing developments between our two large parcels of land. So we run two groups. Those two groups of cows get moved every day during the growing season. In the winter, they might get moved once a week. That might take a total of about an hour and a half to move those cattle every day. The sheep get moved. That doesn't take much time at all. Hogs get moved about once a week. Chicken chores take about half an hour a day. There just isn't that much to running this farm, you know, plain and simple, because we don't do all the meaningless things that a lot of people do. And I know I'm being kind of sarcastic there, but I do that for a reason. At my age, Kelly, you can get kind of old and cranky and sarcastic. So,
Don't have time to waste on anything else, right?
yeah.
Somebody's asking, when are you coming to Canada next?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'll be up there fishing a few times. I know that because I have missed fishing in Canada the last 3 years. Right now, when will I'll be at Tufnell, Saskatchewan there in July for a workshop. That's the only one I have planned right now. I just need to be invited.
When you knock down a cover crop the year before a cash crop, do you graze it intensively with small paddocks, or do you let the cows knock the whole field down?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that all depends on the time of the year. If I'm going to graze it more than once or not, depends on the cover crop. Also depends on the species of livestock. What I rely more on knocking it down is not the livestock as much as I rely on the snow in the winter. Because you know, you guys get a lot of snow too. That'll knock down most covers. And then by the time you go through it with the drill, it's all on the ground. It's not a problem. So it's not so much knocking it down as it is leaving enough biomass there. So you have that armor, because you got to keep that layer of armor on there to inhibit those weeds from germinating. There's one other thing I need to mention about weeds, because it's come up several times. Realize as your soil health advances, you will get a diversity of biology in the soil. And there's organisms called granivores. Granivores are insects that eat grain, that eat seeds. And some really good work by Dr. Randy Anderson at South Dakota State showed if you have healthy soil, literally within the first 3 weeks after those weeds mature and the seed falls, 97% of the seed will be eaten by granivores. You know, it's absolutely amazing. So I think healthy soil, diverse biology, not adding the insecticides, has a lot to do with that also.
Okay. So Canada has the off-calf program right now, which they're trying to promote adding perennial legumes into existing pasture. Have you had positive experience with doing this? I know this is a huge challenge that a lot of guys have talked about, and it's definitely like hard to get it into existing pasture.
Yeah, well, this shows though the hubris of mankind, because my question would be, why do they want to add legumes? Look at native ecosystems. It's well documented that most native ecosystems were very low in legume component, 15% or less. What we find at Understanding Ag, one of our biggest challenges in most grazing systems where they're seeding cropland back to forages, they have way too many legumes. Soil is 1 part nitrogen to 11 parts carbon. Soil is that. So if you add legumes, and I don't care whether you're talking in a cropping system or in a grazing system, you got to have a lot of carbon. What's happening in a lot of these systems, they're putting too much legumes. The livestock aren't able to balance their diets, and you're throwing off the pH in their bodies. And what happens then? Well, you're going to lower fertility rates. You're going to lower pregnancy. Okay. The animals are going to become loose. Your soil is going to collapse because you have too much nitrogen. You're not going to be as well aggregated, because legumes putting off nitrogen, bacteria is going to eat that. It has to balance its carbon needs. So it starts consuming any above ground biomass, any decaying roots, but then it'll consume the carbon in the soil aggregate itself. Pretty soon you get a collapsed soil, lower water infiltration. So that is, I'm not saying you won't find, there will be some legumes in a native ecosystem, but it'll be a much lower component than you think. I would be very careful about trying to establish legumes in a perennial system. Too many. Now, how do you get them established? Well, if your pH is really low, you know, below 5, you're not going to get legumes established in there. Other than that, to get them established, the best method, I feel, is to use adaptive grazing principles, higher stock densities, followed by adequate rest recovery time, will allow your diversity to expand. And then you're going to get more native, natural type legumes coming back. I know that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but it's the truth.
So I guess, like, without seeding, what would you do, try to do for rejuvenating pastures? I mean, like, we've come out of couple of years of drought and stuff has
Yeah.
gotten a little beaten down.
Yep, and it's going to be lacking carbon. Obviously, if this time of year, if you can do some bale grazing out on there, it would help. If not, you can go out when the ground still froze at the spring thaw and broadcast. Typically broadcasting some clovers then. The freeze thawing, of those spring nights and days will help establish those. But then you have to leave enough time. One of the things we see in failures to establish is people come back too quickly. And that little new seedling hasn't reached perennial status yet. And as animals graze it, it's gone, it's done, So you got to leave adequate rest and recovery times.
Excellent. The question box has finally emptied out. So obviously, you've done an amazing job as always.
Well, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy Canada, and I'm going to be looking forward to going back up there.
Definitely try and get you back out here. So
That'd be great. So give Shane a lot of grief next week, and Kelly, please send me a link to that because I want to be asking him some very tough questions.
I definitely
He
will.
doesn't need to know it's me.
I'll register you as anonymous.
That would be good.
Perfect.
You'll enjoy Shane. He's a wealth of knowledge for nutrient cycling, as I said.
Fantastic. Well, I will thank you so much for your time tonight and thank everybody else for joining us. And I know that I learned a lot, so I hope everybody else took little nuggets with them and have a successful spring and growing season ahead.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Have a good year, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.